Wife mocked me at the beach. I vanished that night. Her morning panic said it all. Some moments change everything in an instant, and for me, that moment happened on a pristine stretch of South Beach in Miami. What started as a celebration vacation with friends became the day I finally saw who I'd married. I'd been looking forward to this trip for months. Diane and I had saved up to join our friends Mike and Sarah, plus another couple, Tom and Lisa, for a long weekend in Miami. We'd booked adjacent rooms at a beachfront hotel, planned group dinners, and I'd even researched the best spots for photos since Diane loved documenting our travels. This was supposed to be one of those trips we'd remember fondly for years. By day 3, I was ready to forget it had ever happened. We'd settled into our usual spot on South Beach, 6 beach chairs arranged in a loose circle with our cooler and umbrellas. The weather was perfect, the ocean was this incredible shade of turquoise, and everyone was in vacation mode. I'd volunteered to make a drinks run to the poolside bar at our hotel, which meant trudging through the sand with everyone's orders written on my phone. When I returned 20 minutes later with a tray of overpriced cocktails, I found Diane talking to a lifeguard. Not unusual in itself. The lifeguards were friendly, always checking on beachgoers, making conversation. But something about her body language caught my attention. She was laughing too loud, touching his arm when she spoke, and had positioned herself so her back was to our group. "Could you help me with my sunscreen?" she asked him, holding up the bottle. "I can never reach my shoulders properly." I stood there holding the drink tray, watching my wife of 4 years ask a stranger to touch her while I was 10 feet away. The lifeguard, who looked like he'd stepped out of a fitness magazine, smiled and took the bottle. "No problem. Can't have you burning on my watch." As his hands moved across her shoulders and down her back, Diane closed her eyes and made this soft sighing sound like she was at a spa. The entire interaction lasted maybe 2 minutes, but it felt endless. When she turned around, she caught my eye and shrugged. "What? You were getting drinks?" I handed out the beverages and tried to rejoin the conversation with our friends, but I couldn't shake what I'd just witnessed. It wasn't about the sunscreen. It was about the choice. She could have waited 2 minutes for me to return. She could have asked Sarah or Lisa. Instead, she'd chosen to create an intimate moment with a stranger while I was doing something for the group. The lifeguard, whose name was apparently Jake, didn't leave after the sunscreen application. Instead, he lingered by our chairs, making conversation primarily with Diane. "You guys want to join our volleyball game?" he asked, gesturing toward a net set up further down the beach. "We could use a few more players." Mike and Tom were interested, but before they could answer, Diane was on her feet. "I'd love to play. I was actually on my high school team." She hadn't mentioned volleyball once in the 4 years I'd known her. The group migrated toward the volleyball net, but I quickly realized I was watching, not participating. The teams had been chosen, and Diane had somehow ended up on Jake's side. What followed was 4 hours of my wife acting like a completely different person. She spiked balls with theatrical celebration, dove for saves she normally wouldn't attempt, and high-fived Jake after every point. When they won the first game, she hugged him. A full-body, arms-around-the-neck hug that lasted long enough for our friends to notice. "Diane's really into this game," Sarah commented, settling back into her chair beside me. "Yeah," I replied, not trusting myself to say more. Between games, Diane suggested she and Jake cool off in the ocean. I watched them wade out together, splashing each other like teenagers, while I sat under our umbrella feeling like a spectator in my own vacation. When they returned, water dripping from their bodies, Diane was giggling at something he'd said. "Jake's telling me about this amazing restaurant. Apparently, they have the best seafood in Miami." "We already have dinner reservations," I reminded her, though she was barely listening. "Oh right. Maybe tomorrow night." The afternoon continued this way. Every conversation somehow included Jake. Every laugh was directed at his jokes. When he offered to teach her a better serving technique, she positioned herself directly in front of him, letting him adjust her arm position with his hands. Our friends had stopped trying to include me in conversations about the game. They could see what was happening as clearly as I could. Around 4 o'clock, I'd had enough. I walked over to where Diane was sitting in the sand, building what she called a victory castle with Jake after their team had won 3 consecutive games. Diane, our friends are thinking about heading back to get ready for dinner. Are you planning to rejoin us? The question was reasonable. The tone was calm. But Diane's reaction was immediate and loud enough to carry across the beach. Stop being so insecure. If you can't handle me having fun, just leave. The words hit like a physical slap. Conversations around us stopped. Other beachgoers turned to stare. Jake smirked, clearly enjoying the drama. Our friends looked mortified. I'm not being insecure, I said quietly. I'm asking if you want to have dinner with the people we came here with. Don't tell me what I want to do. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions about how I spend my vacation. She turned back to Jake, dismissing me completely. Sorry about that. Some people just don't know how to relax. I stood there for another moment, sand between my toes, watching my wife perform for a stranger's benefit while publicly humiliating me. The beach felt enormous and claustrophobic at the same time. Everyone was looking at me, waiting to see how I'd respond to being dressed down in front of 50 strangers. I could have escalated, could have made a scene to match hers. Instead, I looked at Diane, still sitting in the sand beside her new friend, and made a decision. You're right, I said. I think I will leave. I walked back to the hotel in complete silence, my mind crystal clear for the first time in hours. The elevator ride to our room felt like traveling to a different planet, away from the chaos of the beach and into a space where I could think. I sat on the edge of our bed for exactly 5 minutes, staring at our scattered belongings, her clothes mixed with mine, and realized I was done pretending this was normal. I pulled out my phone and opened the airline app. The last flight to Denver departed at 11:45 p.m. One seat available in economy. I booked it without hesitation. Then I called the front desk. This is room 847. I need to check out tonight due to a family emergency. The desk clerk was accommodating. Early checkout wouldn't be a problem. I could settle the bill downstairs whenever I was ready. I started packing methodically, folding my clothes the same way I always did, placing my toiletries in their designated compartments. Everything I'd brought to Miami fit into my single suitcase. Diane's belongings remained exactly where she'd left them. Her makeup scattered across the bathroom counter, her sundresses hanging in the closet, her jewelry spread across the dresser. I didn't touch any of it. This wasn't about revenge or sending a message. This was about removing myself from a situation that had become intolerable. By 8 p.m., I was checked out and sitting in the hotel lobby, waiting for my taxi to the airport. The familiar sounds of vacation laughter and clinking glasses filtered in from the bar, but they felt like echoes from someone else's life. I wondered if Diane had noticed I was gone yet, or if she was still building sandcastles with Jake. My phone buzzed once with a text from Mike asking where I'd disappeared to, but I didn't respond. Let them figure it out. The taxi ride to Miami International took 43 minutes through evening traffic. I spent the time watching the city lights blur past, feeling lighter with each mile we traveled away from South Beach. At the airport, I grabbed a sandwich and coffee, found my gate, and waited. Other travelers around me were either heading home from vacation or beginning new adventures. I was doing something else entirely. I was walking away from a marriage that had just revealed its true nature in front of 50 strangers on a beach. The flight boarded on time. I took my window seat, buckled my seatbelt, and turned off my phone. For the next 3.5 hours, I existed in the peaceful limbo of air travel, suspended between the disaster I was leaving behind and whatever came next. I read a magazine, dozed fitfully, and thought about how Diane's face had looked when she told me to leave. There hadn't been any regret there. No recognition that she'd crossed a line. Just irritation that I'd interrupted her fun. We touched down in Denver at 1:47 a.m. local time. I retrieved my suitcase, caught a taxi to our apartment, and let myself in with my key. The familiar smell of home hit me immediately, but it felt different now. Like I was visiting a place I used to live rather than returning to where I belonged. I unpacked my suitcase, put my clothes in the hamper, and went to bed in our king-size bed that suddenly felt enormous. I slept better than I had in months. My phone, which I'd turned back on after landing, had remained silent throughout the night. Diane was probably still at whatever after-party had developed from the beach volleyball game. Or maybe she was having drinks with Jake, comparing notes about insecure husbands who couldn't handle their wives having innocent fun. At 7 a.m. Denver time, 9 a.m. in Miami, my phone exploded. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and 4 voicemails, all from Diane. The messages started confused and escalated to frantic within the span of 30 minutes. Where did you go? Mike said you weren't at dinner. Are you in the room? I don't see your stuff. This isn't funny. Where are you? Oh my God, did you actually leave Miami? You're being ridiculous. It was just volleyball. Call me back right now. I can't believe you abandoned me here. What am I supposed to tell people? You're overreacting about nothing. Come back immediately. I'm booking you a flight. You better be at the airport. Why aren't you answering? This is psychotic behavior. The voicemails were even better. Her voice progressed from annoyed to desperate to genuinely panicked as she realized I wasn't hiding in the hotel somewhere. The last message, left at 9:23 a.m. Miami time, was just her crying and saying my name. I read every message and listened to every voicemail while I drank my coffee and ate cereal at our kitchen table. Then I set my phone aside and didn't respond to any of them. She wanted to know where I was? She'd figure it out eventually. She wanted to know what to tell people? That was her problem now. She'd made her choice on that beach, and now I was making mine. The next morning, I was sitting in the office of Patricia Walsh, a divorce attorney I'd found through an online search and a handful of positive reviews. She was professional, direct, and asked the right questions without judgment. Colorado requires a 90-day waiting period for divorce proceedings, she explained, sliding paperwork across her desk. But we can file immediately. Do you have joint assets that need to be addressed? I handed her the financial documents I'd printed that morning. Bank statements, investment accounts, the lease agreement for our apartment. Patricia reviewed everything with the efficiency of someone who'd seen this exact situation countless times. You'll want to establish separate finances before she returns, she advised. Withdraw exactly half of your joint savings. Document everything. Keep receipts. From her office, I drove to our bank and opened a new checking account. The teller, a friendly woman named Rose, helped me transfer exactly half of our joint savings into my new personal account. $15,437. The remaining balance stayed in the joint account for Diane to access. Fair and clean. No one could accuse me of stealing or hiding assets. Next stop was our apartment management office. Our lease was month to month, which meant I could give 30 days notice without penalty. The property manager, Mr. Chen, was surprised but accommodating. End of next month then, he confirmed, updating his computer. Everything's been in good standing. You'll get your security deposit back within 2 weeks of move-out. I spent the afternoon apartment hunting online and found a furnished studio in a different part of town. Modern building, good security, available immediately. The rent was actually lower than my half of our current place. I put down a deposit over the phone and scheduled a move-in inspection for the following day. By evening, I'd accomplished more in one day than some people manage in a week. Legal representation secured, finances separated, housing arranged. I ordered pizza and worked on my laptop, responding to emails and catching up on projects I'd been neglecting before the vacation. Normal life activities that felt revolutionary in their simplicity. Diane returned to Denver 2 days later. I was sitting at our kitchen table with my laptop open, a stack of moving boxes beside me, when I heard her key in the lock. She walked in carrying her suitcase and wearing the same sundress she'd had on at the beach. Her face was puffy from crying, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," she said, dropping her suitcase in the entryway. "Okay," I replied, not looking up from my screen. "What happened in Miami was nothing. Jake was just being friendly. You completely overreacted and embarrassed me in front of our friends." I continued typing. She moved closer to the table, her voice rising. "Are you even listening to me?" I said it was nothing. Harmless flirtation. The kind of thing that happens on vacation. I saved my work and closed the laptop. "I heard you. Then why are you acting like this? Why did you leave me there? Do you know how humiliating it was to explain why my husband abandoned me? About as humiliating as being told to leave by my wife in front of 50 strangers because I asked if she planned to rejoin our friends. Diane's face flushed. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. I have witnesses. She sat down across from me, reaching for my hands. Look, maybe I got carried away. Maybe I was having too much fun and didn't realize how it looked. But running away like a child? That's not how adults handle relationship problems. I moved my hands away from hers. You're right. Adults handle problems by communicating clearly and making decisive choices. Which is what I'm doing. What do you mean? I gestured toward the stack of papers on the table. I filed for divorce yesterday. You should probably get a lawyer. The color drained from her face. You filed for divorce? Over volleyball and sunscreen. Over public humiliation and complete disrespect. Over you choosing to create an intimate situation with a stranger rather than spend time with your husband. Over you telling me to leave when I asked a reasonable question. Tears started flowing, but they looked more like panic than genuine remorse. You can't be serious. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want. I don't want you to do whatever I want. I want you to want to respect me naturally, without coercion or therapy or negotiation. And you've shown me that's not who you are. She tried anger next. This is insane. You're throwing away 4 years of marriage over one afternoon at the beach. Do you understand how crazy that sounds? One afternoon that revealed everything I needed to know about how you see me and our relationship. The crying intensified. I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you. Doesn't that count for anything? I studied her face, looking for sincerity behind the desperation. If you loved me, you wouldn't have needed Jake's attention. If you respected our marriage, you wouldn't have humiliated me publicly. And if you understood what you'd done wrong, you'd be apologizing instead of minimizing. I am apologizing. No, you're explaining why I shouldn't be upset. That's completely different. Her sister Maria arrived an hour later, armed with righteous indignation and a plan to talk sense into me. She marched into our apartment like a prosecutor approaching a hostile witness. This is ridiculous, she announced before even saying hello. Diane made a tiny mistake and you're ready to blow up your entire marriage? What kind of man does that? I continued packing books into a box. The kind who doesn't accept being publicly humiliated as a normal part of marriage. She was having fun on vacation. Since when is that a crime? Since it involved deliberately ignoring her husband and creating intimate moments with another man while telling that husband to leave if he didn't like it. Maria's confidence faltered slightly. Well, maybe she could have handled it better, but divorce? That's nuclear. That's vindictive. It's decisive. Diane made her choice when she chose Jake's attention over basic respect for me. I'm making my choice in response. Both sisters spent the next 2 hours cycling through every emotional manipulation technique in the book. Tears, threats, guilt trips, promises of change, appeals to our shared history. I kept packing and responding calmly to each attempt. Finally, Maria played her last card. You know she's been crying for 3 days straight? She barely ate anything in Miami after you left. She's devastated. She's devastated that there are consequences for her choices. If she was devastated about hurting me, she would have apologized instead of defending her behavior. They left together, Diane clutching tissues and Maria muttering about stubborn men who don't know a good thing when they have it. I finished packing in peaceful silence, loaded my car, and drove to my new studio apartment. It was clean, quiet, and completely mine. Colorado's mandatory 90-day waiting period turned into a masterclass in persistence and desperation. Diane launched a campaign to win me back that would have impressed a political strategist, if political strategists specialized in emotional manipulation and boundary violations. It started with the surprise visits. I'd come home from work to find her sitting in the hallway outside my apartment door, looking pathetic and holding takeout from my favorite restaurant. I thought you might be hungry, she'd say, as if showing up uninvited with pad thai would somehow erase what had happened in Miami. I'd thank her politely, take the food and close the door. She escalated to enlisting our mutual friends as intermediaries. Mike called first. Look man, I was there. I saw what happened. But don't you think divorce is a little extreme? She's really torn up about this. I appreciated Mike's concern, but I wasn't interested in relitigating the beach incident with every friend we had in common. I've made my decision, I told him. I'd prefer not to discuss it. Sarah tried the female perspective approach. She's been calling me crying every night. She says you won't even talk to her. Maybe you could at least hear her out. She had 4 years to learn how to respect me in public. I'm not interested in giving her remedial lessons now. When the friend interventions failed, Diane moved to written communication. Long emails arrived daily, detailing her therapy sessions with Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, her personal growth journey, and her newfound understanding of boundaries and respect. Each email was longer than the last, filled with therapy buzzwords and promises of transformation. I've been exploring my attachment patterns and how my fear of abandonment led to attention-seeking behaviors. One email read, Dr. Morrison says I was unconsciously testing your commitment by creating jealousy scenarios. I see now how destructive this was to our bond. I read every email but responded to none. Her therapy revelations were probably genuine, but they felt like homework assignments rather than authentic remorse. She was learning the right words to say, but the underlying entitlement remained unchanged. The emails described how sorry she was that I felt hurt, not how wrong her behavior had been. The workplace ambush happened during my lunch break. I was walking back to my office with a sandwich when Diane appeared beside me on the sidewalk. Please, she said, matching my pace. Just 5 minutes. I've learned so much about myself these past weeks. Diane, you can't keep showing up at my job. I'm not causing a scene. I just want to talk like adults. I stopped walking. Adults respect boundaries. Adults don't ambush their estranged spouse at work after being told repeatedly that they need space. I don't know how else to reach you. You won't answer my calls or emails. Because I have nothing to say to you that I haven't already said. She followed me into my office building, talking rapidly about couples therapy and relationship books she'd been reading. Security had to escort her out when she refused to leave the lobby. Her final desperate move was the coffee shop encounter, which I'm convinced she orchestrated despite her claims of coincidence. I was at our former favorite spot, a little place called Mountain View Cafe where we used to meet for weekend breakfast dates. I should have known better than to return there, but their espresso was exceptional and I'd missed it. Diane appeared at my table like a mirage of regret and desperation. I can't believe we're both here, she said, sitting down uninvited. It's like the universe wants us to talk. It's like you followed me here after seeing my location on Find My Friends, which you should have removed from your phone weeks ago. Her composure cracked immediately. I just miss you so much. I miss us. Don't you miss what we had? I finished my coffee methodically while she cried across from me. Other customers were starting to stare, but I'd learned to tune out public scenes involving Diane. I miss the person I thought you were, I said finally. But that person never existed. Miami just revealed who you actually are when you think you can get away with it. That wasn't me. That was someone scared and stupid and desperate for validation. I'm different now. You're different because there are consequences now. If I took you back, you'd eventually revert to who you really are once you felt secure again. She reached across the table for my hands, but I moved them away. Please. We could start over. Clean slate. I'll prove to you that I've changed. You should focus on understanding why you felt entitled to humiliate me publicly rather than trying to convince me to give you another chance to do it again. I left her crying into her untouched latte and walked out. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in downtown Denver. I arrived early, wearing my best suit and carrying a folder of documents I probably wouldn't need. Diane appeared with her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman who looked like she specialized in contentious divorces. But there was nothing to contest. We divided our assets fairly, had no children, and no property disputes. The hearing lasted exactly 18 minutes. Judge Hernandez reviewed our paperwork, confirmed that both parties agreed to irreconcilable differences, and granted the divorce. Good luck to both of you, she said, and just like that, for years of marriage were officially over. In the courthouse hallway, Diane made one last attempt. "This doesn't have to be the end," she said quietly. "We could date again. Start fresh. Prove to you that things could be different." I looked at her standing there in her navy dress, still beautiful, still hoping her looks could somehow override the fundamental incompatibility we'd discovered. "Goodbye, Diane," I said, and walked toward the parking garage without looking back. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I'd built a life that actually felt like mine. The studio apartment had become home in ways our shared place never had. I joined Peak Performance Climbing Gym, partly because I'd always been curious about rock climbing and partly because I needed physical challenges that had nothing to do with my failed marriage. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where success was measured by technique, strength, and mental focus rather than someone else's approval or attention. I'd lost 20 pounds without trying, gained definition in my arms and shoulders, and discovered I had a natural talent for reading climbing routes. My job had improved dramatically too. Without the constant stress of managing Diane's emotional storms and financial demands, I'd been able to focus completely on my engineering projects. The promotion to senior project manager came with a substantial raise and recognition from colleagues who'd noticed my renewed energy and attention to detail. "You seem different lately," my supervisor had mentioned during my review. "More confident, more decisive." He was right. Divorce had stripped away my people-pleasing tendencies and replaced them with clarity about what I would and wouldn't accept from people. It was during my second week of evening climbing sessions that I met Kelly. She was attempting the same intermediate route I'd been working on, a technical sequence that required precise footwork and upper body strength. Unlike most gym climbers who grunted and struggled through difficult sections, Kelly moved with fluid efficiency, making challenging holds look effortless. When she reached the top and rappelled down, I approached her. "That was impressive. You made that route look easy." She laughed, unwrapping her hands from her climbing tape. "Years of practice. I'm Kelly, and that route definitely wasn't easy. Just familiar at this point. I'm David. Still figuring out the difference between the two." We ended up climbing together for the rest of the evening, sharing beta about routes and discussing technique. Kelly was a veterinarian at a practice specializing in wildlife rehabilitation, which explained her practical approach to problem-solving and her easy confidence with physical challenges. She was also refreshingly direct in her communication, asking questions she wanted answers to and giving honest feedback about climbing technique without any hidden agendas or emotional manipulation. "You're overthinking that move," she'd say, pointing to a section where I kept struggling. "Trust your feet and commit to the reach. Half-hearted attempts won't work on overhangs." She was right, both about climbing and apparently about life in general. By our third climbing session together, we'd graduated to grabbing coffee afterward and discussing everything from her work treating injured hawks to my engineering projects. Kelly listened with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions, and shared her own professional challenges without turning every conversation into emotional drama. The contrast with my marriage was striking. During our second week of post-climbing coffee dates, Diane made her unwelcome appearance at the gym. I was belaying Kelly on a challenging route when I noticed someone signing up at the front desk who looked suspiciously familiar. When I confirmed it was actually Diane, dressed in brand new climbing gear that still had price tags attached, I realized her therapy hadn't addressed her tendency toward manipulative behavior. "Friend of yours?" Kelly asked when she reached the ground, having noticed my distracted belaying. "Ex-wife. This is probably going to be awkward." Diane approached us with theatrical casualness, carrying a climbing harness she clearly didn't know how to wear properly. "David, what a coincidence. I had no idea you'd taken up climbing." The coincidence claim was laughable. Diane had never shown interest in any physical activity more strenuous than yoga, and she'd somehow chosen the exact gym where I'd been climbing for months, arriving during my regular evening session. "Diane, this is Kelly. Kelly, my ex-wife Diane." Kelly extended her hand politely. "Nice to meet you. Are you just starting out with climbing?" "Oh yes, completely new to this. But I've always been interested in challenging myself physically. I thought it might be fun to try something adventurous for once." The performance was painful to watch. Diane spent the next hour attempting basic climbing moves with obvious inexperience while casting meaningful glances in my direction. She'd chosen routes directly adjacent to where Kelly and I were climbing, ensuring maximum visibility for her struggle and determination show. Kelly observed the situation with the same analytical approach she brought to climbing problems. After Diane's third dramatic fall from a beginner route, Kelly leaned over and whispered, "She's not actually trying to learn climbing, is she?" "No, she's trying to create drama or make me jealous or prove some point about being adventurous now. I'm not sure which. Want to move to the advanced section? Those routes require experience she obviously doesn't have." We relocated to the far side of the gym, where the advanced routes started at difficulty levels that would take Diane months to approach safely. She followed us anyway, pretending to study route maps while obviously listening to our conversations about technique and weekend climbing plans. When Kelly suggested we plan a trip to Garden of the Gods for outdoor climbing, Diane suddenly developed opinions about Colorado's best climbing destinations despite having never mentioned outdoor recreation once during our marriage. "Garden of the Gods is beautiful," she interjected from 3 feet away. "I've been thinking about trying outdoor climbing myself once I get more comfortable in the gym." Kelly handled the obvious intrusion with diplomatic grace. "That's great. Outdoor climbing is definitely more challenging than gym routes. You'll want to get really solid on indoor technique first." "Oh, I'm sure I'll pick it up quickly. I've always been naturally athletic." I watched Diane attempt to project confidence about an activity she'd literally started that day, and felt nothing but mild embarrassment for her. No anger, no jealousy, no desire to rescue her from the awkward situation she'd created. Just secondhand embarrassment and relief that her desperation was no longer my responsibility to manage. 6 months later, the contrast between my life and Diane's trajectory had become stark according to mutual friends who couldn't resist sharing updates I didn't request. Mike mentioned during a casual conversation that Diane had moved back in with her parents after struggling to maintain her lifestyle on a single income. "She had to give up that fancy apartment," he said. "Apparently, she'd been using credit cards to cover the rent difference after you guys split the savings." Sarah provided additional details during a group dinner. "She quit her marketing job a few weeks ago. Said it was too stressful, but I think she got fired. She's been posting these weird inspirational quotes on social media about toxic people and learning to love yourself." I listened to these updates with the same mild interest I'd feel hearing about a former coworker's career changes. Diane's struggles were unfortunate, but they were natural consequences of choices she'd made both during and after our marriage. Meanwhile, my relationship with Kelly had developed into something I hadn't experienced before: genuine partnership with someone who enhanced my life rather than complicating it. Kelly had met my parents during a barbecue at their house, where she'd impressed my father by discussing wildlife conservation and my mother by helping with dinner preparations without being asked. "She's good for you," my mom had said afterward. "You seem more relaxed than you've been in years." Kelly fits seamlessly into my friend group, joining our weekend mountain biking trips and contributing to conversations without demanding to be the center of attention. She had her own interests, her own friends, and her own financial independence that she maintained without drama or resentment. The relationship felt effortless in ways I'd forgotten were possible. We split expenses naturally, supported each other's careers without competition, and resolved disagreements through actual communication rather than emotional manipulation or public scenes. When I mentioned how different this felt from my marriage, Kelly offered her perspective with characteristic directness. "Healthy relationships shouldn't require constant negotiation about basic respect," she said. "If someone needs to be taught how to treat you decently, they're not ready for partnership." The social media contact attempt happened during our 6-month anniversary dinner. I was reviewing the wine list when Kelly showed me her phone with an amused expression. "Your ex-wife just sent me a friend request and a message. Want to read it?" The message was exactly what I expected. A lengthy explanation about how Diane had been reflecting on her past behavior and wanted to reach out to apologize for any awkwardness at the climbing gym. She hoped there were no hard feelings and that she and Kelly could perhaps grab coffee to discuss the real story behind the divorce, since she was sure I'd only shared one perspective. "She wants to explain her side of the story," Kelly said, already reaching for the block button. As if there are multiple valid sides to publicly humiliating your spouse and then stalking them at a climbing gym. You don't have to block her on my account. I'm blocking her on my account. I don't need that kind of drama in my life, and anyone who contacts their ex's new girlfriend to relitigate a divorce isn't someone I want to interact with. Kelly's boundaries were as clear and firm as her climbing technique. She blocked Diane immediately and suggested we go camping that weekend to avoid any potential follow-up drama. I know this great spot near Breckenridge. Hiking, fishing, complete cell phone dead zone. Perfect for forgetting crazy exes exist. The camping trip was revelatory. 3 days of mountain air, challenging hikes, and conversations that ranged from Kelly's veterinary work to my engineering projects to shared dreams about future adventures. No relationship drama, no manipulation, no emotional storms. Just two people enjoying each other's company and building something together. On our final evening, sitting beside a campfire while Kelly organized her fishing gear, she made an observation that crystallized everything I'd been feeling. I keep thinking about what you told me about your marriage, she said. How she would create problems and then demand you fix them. How exhausting that must have been. It was like living with someone who deliberately broke things so she could watch me repair them. My last relationship was similar. Constant chaos presented as passion. Took me 2 years to realize that drama isn't the same as depth, and someone who creates problems isn't the same as someone who solves them. Kelly had a gift for articulating complex emotional dynamics with scientific precision. I admire how you handled your divorce, she continued. No retaliation, no bitterness, just clear boundaries and decisive action. That takes real strength. It felt like the only sane response to an insane situation. Most people would have either fought back or tried to win her back. You did neither. You just removed yourself from a situation that wasn't working and built something better. She was right. The camping trip reinforced how different my life had become since choosing self-respect over attempting to manage someone else's dysfunction. Kelly and I returned to Denver refreshed and closer, with plans for future adventures that excited rather than exhausted me. The social media monitoring I'd been unconsciously doing had stopped completely. I no longer checked Diane's Instagram posts or listened for updates from mutual friends. Her life had become irrelevant to mine in the healthiest possible way. When we unpacked our camping gear in Kelly's apartment, which I'd been spending increasing amounts of time in, she brought up a practical consideration that felt natural rather than pressured. My lease is up for renewal next month, she mentioned while organizing her hiking boots. I've been thinking about maybe finding a bigger place. Maybe with someone who enjoys outdoor adventures and doesn't create drama for entertainment. That sounds like exactly the kind of person I'd want to live with, I replied, and meant it completely. Moving in together felt like the logical next step rather than a relationship milestone we were rushing toward or avoiding. We were two independent adults who discovered we functioned better as a team, which was exactly how partnerships were supposed to work. A year after the divorce was finalized, Kelly and I had found a house together in the foothills outside Denver. 2 bedrooms, a home office for my engineering work, and mountain views that made every morning feel like a vacation. The mortgage was affordable on our combined incomes, and we'd furnished it together with pieces we both actually liked rather than compromising toward mutual dissatisfaction. Our first housewarming party was everything I'd hoped entertaining could be. Friends genuinely enjoying themselves without any underlying drama or attention-seeking performances. It was during our friend Tom's wedding reception that Diane made her final appearance in my story. Kelly and I were dancing to some classic rock song when I spotted her across the reception hall, looking smaller and more uncertain than I remembered. She'd apparently been invited as someone's plus one and was standing alone near the bar, wearing a dress that looked expensive but somehow desperate. "She's here," I mentioned to Kelly during a slow song. "Want to leave?" "Not unless you do. This is Tom's day, not hers. Besides, I'm curious to see if she's learned anything about appropriate behavior." Kelly's confidence was infectious. We continued dancing, chatting with other guests, and enjoying the celebration while keeping peripheral awareness of Diane's location. She spent most of the evening alone, occasionally attempting conversations with people who clearly didn't know her well enough to sustain much interaction. During the cake cutting, she approached us with what looked like carefully rehearsed composure. "David," she said quietly, appearing beside our table. "Congratulations on the house. I heard Tom mention it earlier." "Thank you." I kept my response neutral and brief. "You look really happy," she continued, glancing at Kelly with something that might have been envy or regret. "Both of you do." Kelly smiled politely but said nothing, letting me handle the interaction. "We are happy," I replied simply. Diane seemed to be gathering courage for something more substantial. "I've been doing a lot of work on myself this past year. Therapy, self-reflection, really examining my patterns and where they came from." "That's good. Personal growth is important. I wanted to tell you that I understand now what happened between us. About Miami, about everything. I was testing boundaries to see how much I could get away with because I felt taken for granted in our marriage. I thought if I could make you jealous, it would prove you still cared." The confession was more honest than I'd expected, but it also confirmed everything I'd suspected about her motivations. "Thank you for telling me that," I said. "It explains a lot. I know it's too late for us, but I wanted you to know that I realize how destructive my behavior was. How much I hurt you with my need for validation and attention." She looked genuinely remorseful, but there was still something calculated about the timing and setting of this conversation. A wedding reception where I couldn't easily walk away, in front of my new girlfriend, designed for maximum emotional impact. "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully. "But understanding why someone hurt you doesn't change the fact that they were willing to hurt you in the first place." Kelly squeezed my hand under the table, a subtle show of support that didn't go unnoticed by Diane. "I know I can't undo what I did. I just hope someday you'll be able to forgive me, even if we can never be friends. I don't carry anger about it anymore, if that's what you're asking. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen or allowing someone back into your life who demonstrated they're willing to harm you for entertainment." Diane's composure finally cracked slightly. "I wasn't trying to harm you. I was just confused and scared and didn't know how to handle feeling invisible in my own marriage." "Then you should have talked to me about feeling invisible instead of creating a public spectacle designed to humiliate me while pursuing another man's attention." The bluntness of my response seemed to surprise her. She'd probably expected more emotional engagement, more possibility for extended discussion about our failed relationship. "You're right," she said quietly. "I should have handled everything differently." As she turned to walk away, Kelly spoke for the first time. "Diane." She looked back hopefully. "David told me about your therapy and self-improvement work. That takes courage. I hope you find someone who appreciates the person you're becoming." It was a kind response that also served as a clear dismissal. Diane nodded, her eyes filling with tears, and disappeared back into the crowd of wedding guests. Kelly and I didn't discuss the encounter until we were driving home through the mountain darkness. "How do you feel about that conversation?" she asked, one hand on my knee while I navigated the winding roads. "Relieved, actually." She finally admitted what I always suspected about her motivations. It confirms that leaving was the right choice. She seemed genuinely sorry. She seemed sorry that her behavior had consequences. But notice how she framed it. Everything was about her feelings and her needs and her confusion. Even her apology was centered on her experience rather than the harm she caused. Kelly was quiet for a moment, processing. "You're right. A real apology would have focused on how her actions affected you, not on explaining why she felt justified in doing them." "Exactly. And the fact that she chose a wedding reception for this conversation shows she still thinks in terms of dramatic timing and emotional manipulation, even when she's trying to be sincere." We drove the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, both of us thinking about the evening and what it represented. When we pulled into our driveway, Kelly made an observation that perfectly captured my feelings. "I'm excited about our trip to Yellowstone next month," she said, looking up at the stars visible from our mountain location. "It feels good to plan adventures with someone who actually wants to be there." She was absolutely right. Diane's public humiliation on that Miami beach had been a gift disguised as a betrayal, forcing me to confront the reality of our relationship and freeing me to find genuine partnership with someone who valued the same things I did. As we walked into our house together, I realized that Diane's final confession had provided the closure I didn't know I needed. She'd confirmed that her behavior was intentional manipulation rather than innocent fun, which validated every decision I'd made since that afternoon on South Beach. More importantly, it highlighted the contrast between a relationship built on games and tests versus one built on mutual respect and shared goals. Kelly turned on the porch light, illuminating our front door with its mountain view backdrop, and I felt completely at peace with the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage. Sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is show you exactly who they are when they think they can get away with it.